The theme of peace is one that we probably refer to and return to more often than any other. And of course, that's unsurprising. Because the sense of connection that we need with one another in order to create peace for one another is broken when we are disconnected from ourselves. So, in a sense, the call to peace is really the most profound call to come back to our own true nature and really to live from it, to feel capable of living from it and not to feel intimidated by it or divorced from it. It's such a gentle call, but sometimes walking that peace path back to our own hearts can seem very, very difficult, and the obstructions can seem very convincing. There's a beautiful teaching that comes from the Christian tradition, which most of you will know. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And what could this possibly mean? I think myself that what it possibly means is that in understanding that it is our greatest privilege to discover the infinity and the infinite gifts of peace, that in discovering that we can only do it by also discovering our divine nature, our perfect peace, our perfect happiness. And of course, this brings us into conflict with our human nature. So we are constantly moving forward and going backwards, moving forward and going backwards. We have our moments of vision, and then we have our moments of grave darkness and doubt. But the wonderful thing is that the connections that we so yearn for can be restored and are restored. And it's those connections that allow us not only to be peace, to live peacefully, but also to be a source of peace for others. And I think that this is our greatest responsibility in the world in which we live. The greatest responsibility that we have is to be a source of peace for others. And you've heard me say before, and I'll say it again, so far from being passive, this is the most active way, the most conscious way, the most conscientious way, and also the most rewarding way that we could possibly live. The Buddhists have great teachings on many things, and they have a great teaching on the obstructions to peace. And I want to share you just a tiny version of it today. It's really the Reader's Digest version because we haven't time for a whole teaching. We could spend days on it. So I'm just giving you a little seed that you can water as you think about it. This is known widely as a Buddhist teaching, but actually it also comes from the Hindu tradition, because of course the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition are as closely related as the Jewish tradition and the Christian tradition. So the Buddhists tell us that there are three main obstructions to peace. One of them is anger and all that flows from it. And a lot flows from it. And we live in a world in which there is a great deal of anger, and where anger is very easily and carelessly and casually normalized. The second one is greed, which we could also understand as a state of dissatisfaction. And of course that's also very common. Our capitalist system depends upon us being dissatisfied a lot of the time so that we will crave something new. Maybe it's not our capitalist system only, maybe it's just our human condition that we constantly crave something new. Or we crave what we don't yet have. And this is part of greed. And the third one, which is of course the most important of all, is ignorance. The obstruction of ignorance. And the obstruction of ignorance really means not knowing who we are, not knowing what we are capable of, not knowing how easily, how readily, how lightly we can afford to be generous, to be peace-loving, to resolve our conflicts in ways that don't add more harm to the situation, to ourselves or to the world. In traditional Hinduism, the person who has resolved these obstructions, who's let them melt in the sun like an ice block, is regarded as enlightened. And those people who set themselves this task of enlightenment, to free themselves of obstructions to peace, were not, I would suggest, all that different from us. They probably had some of the same feelings of insufficiency that you do on this day, 17th of July, 2011. But I guess it's possible. So, anger. Our body is our greatest teacher here. We feel it in our body. It's very agitating to be with people who are angry. We owe it to one another to withdraw that agitation. If we feel angry, we can do something about it without giving it out to others. We can sit with it. We can ask it what it needs. We can ask it what it's telling us. We can ask it what we need to say. We don't just have to direct it outwards. We have some beautiful children here, and we also have some beautiful babies in our congregation who are not here. And I'm not sure if we have a single person here today who is 2. But we know that when children are 2, they go through the stage called terrible 2s, when they're suddenly confronted with this awful reality that life is not always going to go their way. What a horrendous thing to discover. And some people never get over it. Some people truly never get over it. So it's so nice that you laugh, because the next time something doesn't go your way and your reaction is to be a little bit violent or even quite a little bit violent, just bring yourself back and say, thank God I'm no longer 2. Thank God I can see the path ahead, and get a sense of proportion here, that perhaps what I'm angry about really doesn't warrant disturbing the peace. In the Jain tradition, which is again a tradition that comes to us from that same family, we hear this beautiful prayer. Peace and universal love is the essence of the gospel preached by all the enlightened ones. How could it possibly be anything else? How could it possibly be anything else? The Lord has preached that equanimity is the Dharma, is the teaching, equanimity. That we don't have to live just from our reactions, that we can live from a more serene place, which is not a passive place, it's a highly engaged place, and it's filled with life. And then the prayer goes on, forgive do I, creatures all. We are all in this muddle together. Forgive do I, creatures all, and let all creatures forgive me for my muddling also. Unto all have I friendship, and unto none enmity. Know, says this teaching, know that violence is the cause of all misery in our world. Violence is the knot of bondage. Do not injure any living being. This is the unalterable way of spiritual life. The second of these obstructions, and each of us will have these in different permutations as we go through our lives. The second is greed. And when I was reflecting on this and thinking about it, and thinking about its close relative, dissatisfaction, I thought how little time we give really to contemplating what we have and what we have within as well as without. You know, we spend so much time mourning what we do not have. Sometimes we even spend time wishing our life was resembling somebody else's life rather than the life that we have. And this is a kind of greed also. In Seeking the Sacred, I tell a story, and I think that Rebecca will know this story because I'm pretty sure that you were there. The story comes from one of the retreats that I gave at Mana Retreat Centre. And we'd been there for 2 or 3 days and had got to know one another quite well. And we were in the big circle in the beautiful hall there. And quite suddenly, and I can't remember what preceded this, I was listening to a young woman, Kirsten, speaking about something in a way that was not disrespectful of herself, but not appreciative either of herself. And quite suddenly and spontaneously I asked all the people present to stand, and I stood in front of Kirsten and said to her, looked deeply into her eyes and said to her, Kirsten, you are enough. And then gradually I moved around each person in the circle and said to each of them in turn, you are enough. And of course, by the time I got to the end, we were all weeping because we have all spent so much of our lives, whatever age we are, doubting ourselves, doubting our sufficiency, doubting the divine love that lives within us, and that we can share and share and share and share because it never runs out. The third of the obstructions is ignorance. Misjudging situations, not reading the situations as kindly and as compassionately and as wisely as we could, but also the ultimate ignorance, the most basic ignorance of all, which is to misread who we are. And again, I write about this so explicitly in Seeking the Sacred. I wrote about it actually also in Intimacy and Solitude, where I wrote about the self. What do we think the self is? What do we identify with? What are the planks, the foundations of our own identity? This matters. This matters very much on the spiritual path, because I cannot honour and respect and show my concern for you and care for you, even when I don't like what you stand for, even when I don't like what you think, even when I don't like how you behave. I can't do that. I can't honour you until I also know how to honour my own gift of life. So this question of ignorance is extraordinarily important, because once we understand it, then all the violences that are normalised in our world, even the violences of war and the violences that happen within our own homes, make no sense. Their logic is utterly crushed, utterly ruined, once we truly know who we are and therefore who the other is. That we are souls on a human journey, supporting one another as best we can. And that peace comes to life, peace comes into existence, peace becomes real only when we can inhabit it and allow it to inhabit us. When we can give it to one another and receive it from one another.